A huge thank you to all the super sponsors who make it possible for me to make these videos. Visit David X Newton on Patreon to join the ASCII Brigade. In the previous video, we created a ZScript class that acts as a pickup, and we saw it worked when we manually summoned it. Now let's get enemies to drop some for the player to collect when they're killed. In the Decorate world, we would at this point have to write a new subclass of every monster and alter their drop chances or death states to include the commands to create new orbs. But because we're in ZScript, we can write an event handler, which will be called automatically whenever a monster death occurs, and we can add new actions there instead of having to alter the object itself. The Events and Handlers page on the ZDoom wiki shows us that we can use the World Thing Died event to react to when a thing reaches 0 health, so let's implement an event handler with that event now. We're going to add a new class in our ZScript file below the Doom orb. We're going to call this one Monster Death Event Handler, and it's going to extend from Event Handler. Again, we want to do an override here. This time we're overriding the function World Thing Died, and the ZDoom wiki says that this function will have a world event object passed to it called E. For now, we're just going to use console.printf again. Very similar to the call we made when debugging the Doom orb, we're just going to acknowledge that a monster of a certain class name was killed. The ZDoom wiki page says that in this particular event we'll have access to the actor that died, referred to as Thing, and the actor that inflicted the damage that caused the death, called Inflictor. So starting with event E, we want to refer to Thing, and we want to get its class name. Before we can test this, we need to do one more thing. GZDoom has the option to make an event handler apply either globally or just in specific maps, so it needs to be told where it should put ours. We want it to be called throughout the whole game, so we'll specify that in a game info section in the map info lump. We're going to create a new map info lump here, add a game info section, and then say add event handlers equals, followed by the name of our event handler. If we try the project out now, we'll see a message coming up whenever a monster is killed, with the message changing depending on the monster type. Now we want to replace the logging behaviour with some code to create a Doom orb where the monster was standing. We'll have to get 2 pieces of information out of the dying actor so that we can create a Doom orb at the appropriate place. We want the monster's position and how tall it is. You can see where these properties are available to us on ZDoomDoc's page about the actor class. Pos is a vector 3 with the x, y and z coordinates of the actor, and height is the actor's height in map units. We should talk about what a vector 3 is. This is a collection of 3 coordinates written as 3 numbers or variables in parentheses, for example x, y, z or 17, 23, 24. In ACS, coordinates often had to be expressed in very unwieldy ways, using separate variables and parameters for each one, like in the definition for a spawn item ex. Using vectors instead of separate parameters like this lets us wrap them up in a way that's much less verbose. So we now know where to find the things we want in our actor, which is called Thing in our event. We're going to set up a vector 3 variable for the monster's position and a double for its height. In ZScript, you can either declare the variable's types outright like this, or just use the let keyword to use whatever type they need to be, but I personally prefer keeping them explicit. Having got the position and the height of the dying monster, we'll use the actor.spawn function to create a Doom orb actor. This function is a lot less clunky than the large library of slightly differently named ACS ones, and it simply takes a class name of the actor you want to spawn and a vector 3 representing the world position at which to spawn it. For our spawn call, we're going to make our vector out of the individual parts of the monster's position, which are available to us under the names x, y and z from a vector 3. Then we're going to add half the monster's height to the z coordinate, therefore moving the spawn point up off the ground. With the Monster Death Event Handler now active, you should be able to run the game again and see monsters dropping the Doom orbs when they're killed. Let's do a little more to this orb spawning code so that instead of dropping straight down, they get flung away from the dying monster. We want to alter the orb's velocity when it's spawned, and unlike ACS, we need to do that outside the spawn function. Instead, we'll assign the result of the spawn function to a variable so that we can manipulate it later on. The result of this function is the spawned actor that we'll just call orb. Taking a look at the ZDoomDocs page again, we can see that there's another vector 3 called vel on actor classes that we can use to set their velocity. Therefore, we'll create a new vector 3 and set the actor's vel to that just after it's been spawned. We want the values of this vector to be random, and we can do that with the frandom function, which ZScript inherits from Decorate. It takes a minimum and a maximum, and you can play about with the values as you like to get the effect you want. We want a range of negative to positive x and y values, and a positive z value so that the orb starts off heading upwards. Finally, we'll take our vector 3 and assign it to the vel variable on the orb. Check the effect in-game again and you'll see our random element added as our orbs are now flung away from the monster that drops them. Before we finish with our event handler, let's make one more adjustment. At the moment, each monster drops just one orb, but it feels like the player should be rewarded more for bringing down large monsters than small ones. One more trip to the ZDoom docs page gives us something that looks useful here. The get max health function will give us the starting health of the monster, which sounds like a good measure of how much of a threat it was to the player. So now we want to spawn a number of orbs proportional to the get max health value, and we can do that by running a for loop which has the same syntax as in other C-derived languages. We give it a variable and a starting point, a condition that has to be true for the loop to continue, and a thing to do on each loop. In this example, I'm going to increase I by 10 on every loop, so that for every 10 hit points the monster had, it will spawn one orb. Again, you can feel free to adjust the behaviour to your liking. And when you start up the game again, you should see small to huge showers of these orbs appearing depending on the monster you've chosen to victimise. We've got our orb spawning and collecting done now, but we still need to let the player see how many of these things they're collecting. In the next video, we'll cover how we can use ZScript to draw to the HUD.